Hey guys, welcome to part two of our Fast and Furious theme park land imagining.
Yes.
If you haven't already, please go back and watch part one because we're going to be starting in the middle of our pitch on the reimagining of the Fast and Furious attractions into something a little more palatable, a little bit more enjoyable for us theme park nerds. I'm going to hand it over to Aaron and Drew.
I'm getting a really cool idea of what your land is going to look like. So that's really neat. Nice.
I think we're saving the good stuff for last, which is very exciting.
Yeah, for sure.
So we've talked about a restaurant and we've talked about the general ambiance of our Fast and Furious land. So now we have our additional experience and our e-ticket ride. Drew, which would you like to do first?
I definitely want to do like you said, I think I want to save best for last. I want to save my e-ticket attraction. So I'd like to do my additional experience.
Awesome. Yeah, I got to kind of touch on the elements of the environment in our previous segment, but I didn't want to give away too much in my additional experience. And so I sort of held back some details. So I'm going to jump back into that territory a bit in talking about my additional experience. In one of the movies, there is a car hacker named Cypher.
Yes.
And so my additional experience is going to be interacting with various prop cars that are spread throughout the land using something called a Cypher station. And it's basically just an interactable prop.
Yeah.
But they're all full-size cars that do something fun and interesting. This is a very popular thing in Universal, especially with Super Nintendo World opening. There's a lot of interactivity that uses the power band, which is a little Mario wristband. But this would just be a phone interaction because there would be some different options and different opportunities to interact potentially based on where you are. Yeah. So just a couple of the cool things that I thought you could do. If you go buy a car that has an open trunk and the huge subwoofer, you know the car I'm talking about, Drew, with the huge 18. It's completely not a usable trunk anymore. Yes. It's just fully been designed to be a bass cannon.
Yeah.
So you can actually come up, scan a little QR code or something similar to it, and just blast music out of the thing. And just make this huge blast. But you got to do something with that blast. So the car itself starts shaking, and it starts shaking an adjacent building next to you, and you start seeing the brickwork rattle and the glass rattle. And so the whole environment is now responding to your little just entry into the car.
That's cool. I love that.
Another one I thought of was another Cypher station that I thought of was having a car either on jacks, or I thought it would also be funny to do a parking boot.
Okay.
And to be able to actually rev up the car and spin a wheel that is just free spinning. It's not actually turning, it's not moving the car, but to have that motion, have kind of a Rube Goldberg effect and have it connect to a wire that connects to a thing and just interacts with the rest of the environment around it. The one that I thought would be the silliest is to have a tow truck where you can raise and lower the tow arm. And when you raise the tow arm high enough, what you see at the end, lifting it out of a big crater, a big hole, a big pit, is a Universal tram.
Nice.
So that is a little bit of my environmental interactive experience, is to be able to basically hack these cars and have fun with them.
That's super cool. And it kind of reminds me of a mix between the hacking that you can do at Galaxy's Edge at Disney, and also something you can do in the Simpsons area at Universal Studios at the nuclear power plant. There's a button that you can press, and then these 50-gallon drums start shaking and alarms start going off. So I really like that. And I like the idea, because if it's a button, that button is right next to a dining area. And if you sit there, there will be kids that will push it every minute and a half when it's available. Mm-hmm. And it gets a little old. So I like the idea of you're hacking it with your phone. That's super great.
It's also hands-free, which I think everyone right now is going to be germ conscious in theme parks.
Yeah.
So anything that can be hands free is going to be a good thing.
Definitely.
I was really inspired by some of the Wizarding World wand interactions.
Yeah.
So I was trying to think of one that would be that would use like the water effect where like the umbrella rains, but to have it either like leak oil or gas, just like to brown up some water and spray people with it. But I couldn't figure out how that would not stain.
That's true. Yeah.
And I don't want to upset people that badly.
You can have a
Movies do
car
on
that
their own.
blows its radiator and sprays
That's
people
true.
and has fog coming up on under the hood. That you could do something
Yeah,
like
just
that.
a nice like CO2 fog, just poof,
Yeah.
that would be plenty.
A little poof. One thing that you did mention that I really like is the idea, and I forgot to mention it during my description, but like I also want to have cars, like real movie cars, placed in different areas of the park to help, like you said, tell that story of where you are in the land. But like one thing that has always bothered me about the Universal Studios cars is when they do bring them, they're real cars. Like they were actual cars from the movies. And so if you've ever seen a movie car closer than 10 feet away, you'll know they're terribly built. And it absolutely breaks my heart because in the movies, they make these cars look absolutely amazing and like super shiny and great. And then you see them up close and you're like, wow, this is a huge pile of junk, you know?
Yeah.
So I really love what Universal Studios Florida did with the queue area for Fast and the Furious Supercharged, where the cars are indoors and they're just really well kept. And they're clearly not the movie cars, like they're remade, and I think that's the way it should be. I wish that there was an automotive car museum somewhere in Universal Studios that did have the actual movie cars that are beat up and modified, and you get to see like the behind the scenes stuff. But like having cars from your favorite characters in the films on the roads where you get to walk up and they look just as beautiful as they do in the movies, I think that's really cool. That's really cool. So I love the interactive idea though, especially if you had like if you were to do that in my Tokyo area. What's Little Bow Wow's character? Anyway, I can't remember his name, but he has that Hulk car. You know, I think that would be the perfect car to do some sort of interaction with and hack. So that'd be super fun.
I mean, just that one would be cool to just be able to drive forwards and backwards and have it smash.
Yeah. And then
Hulk smash.
And then of course when it does it, it would be the song "My Life Be Like Ooh." His theme song for sure.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, cool. Well, I love that additional experience. That's really neat. It's super interactive, and that's becoming more and more popular for a reason because it's really fun.
Yeah.
So
It
nice.
is.
Okay, cool. Well, let me move on to my additional experience. My experience is a little bit bigger than that. I had spoken with you about it before we started recording, and you know it's kind of a big one, but and it's a little on the nose, but that's okay. So recently, if you've been to Hollywood Studios before Star Wars Galaxy's Edge was built at Disney World, you'll know that it replaced an area that I was really sad to see it go. It was a beloved area. It was a beloved show called Lights, Motors, Action. And it was an extreme stunt show featuring lots of cars and motorcycles and jumps and pyrotechnics and stunt performers falling off of roofs and real actual performance drivers who are so incredibly talented. They had it in Florida and they had it in Paris. As of last March, Paris has also shut down Lights, Motors, Action. And to me, that's a huge shame. I think it was as a car person, I love waking up to the smell of burning rubber in the morning if I can. And it was one of the only places where you could truly see amazing car maneuvers from like there was no bad seat in the house, and appreciate how good these drivers really are. So for me, I think Universal should hire them. And behind the Toyota Supra and behind Dom's Challenger is going to be my main entrance to my Fast and the Furious test facility. So I'm going to read a bunch of notes. I have a bunch of notes about this, but It's essentially, like I said, a version of Lights, Motors, Action, themed and based around Fast and the Furious. But I want it to include more fire and more explosions. Like, let's Michael Bay this thing, basically. Yeah.
And there are plenty of moments of fire and explosions and gunplay in Lights, Motors, Action.
Yeah, so I don't think you'd have to do much.
This is turning it to 11. I love it.
Definitely. And so one of my favorite things, though, is, like I said, the display of cars. And so once you go between the vehicles and you enter, I actually want the queue to almost like have a pre-show queue that's indoors. And what I want it to be is there's a scene in one of the Fast and the Furious movies where they walk into essentially a government impound bank of supercars. And Dom and his team get to go in and they get to pick and choose whatever cars they want, and they're all on racks, and it looks amazing. I want that for my queue, except I want it to be cars that have been driven by villains in these movies, because there are so many iconic cars and so many villains. And, Hobbs has been around a lot of these cars, and a lot of them haven't really been destroyed. Some of them will be on the racks, which I think would be fun, but I want them all to be screen correct, so movie correct. I want them to have tags hanging off of them that tell you, that have like Easter eggs, like what case number this is. It could be like 1 through 9, right? Because it's like the Fast and Furious movies. And then I want it to have the character's name. So it's kind of like if you're a huge Fast and the Furious car nerd, you know that car belongs to Braga, right? Like, you just know. So that's my pre-show queue. Once you get through that, it's going to be kind of like Lights, Motors, Action, just because with exhaust and tire smoke, it has to be outdoors. I know, I know it's hot in Florida, for example, and it's hot in Anaheim sometimes, or LA, to have a show like this, but it needs to be in an outdoor stadium. And essentially, the story is you have been invited by Hobbs to watch Toretto and the team test out some vehicles while they run some scenarios to see if those cars that they pick will work for their next mission. So they're going to be running through a few different cars. Obviously, there needs to be some character elements, right? Like you need to be able to see Dominic Toretto and Hobbs, who is The Rock, speaking. So I want them to be on a screen in the middle, kind of like what Lights, Motors, Action has right now, or did. Basically, what it'll be is Toretto will be talking with Hobbs. He sees the bank of cars that you were just in. So it'll be filmed in the same area. And then he sees a bunch of cars in the corner that are covered under tarps. And he looks at Hobbs and he says, what cars are those? And Hobbs says, oh, you can't use those. These are prototypes and they cost more than you can afford, pal. Which is an iconic line from the movie. Anyway, Toretto obviously gives him that look. And then Hobbs reluctantly hands him the keys. And those are our hero stunt vehicles for this show. And so the idea is that, the team suits up with helmets so that, that way you can have drivers that don't have to look like Dominic Toretto, and then the show starts with the team showing some basic demonstrations of these custom built vehicles and showing off their capabilities by doing some drift circles and some basic donuts. And then, of course, we cut to Roman Pierce, who is from Too Fast, Too Furious, who is quite cocky. His character is quite cocky. So he goes on about a rant about how, that was easy. Look at me. I've never even seen a car like this before, and I know how to drive it. And then Hobbs looks at him and says, by the way, we're going to take you off learner's mode. So whenever Roman Pierce goes up, they slap him right back down. He's kind of like the joke character of the whole franchise. As we're laughing at Roman Pierce in that scene, everything goes dark. And then things kind of take a turn. And what happens is Owen Shaw, who is Jason Statham's character, Owen Shaw appears on the rooftop with other bad guys in cars and try to ambush the team as they're practicing with their new vehicles. So you're immediately brought up with a bazooka down at one of the cars. You've got gunfire. The team has to scramble basically in these cars that they've never used before. But They're the best drivers in the world. Of course, they'll be able to figure out how to use these things. So, obviously, Hobbs takes out one of the snipers on the roof. He does his 40-foot fall onto a pad. That's one of the stunt performers. And then we hear the sound of a very different car before it enters the scene. And this car, I think, is one of the most iconic cars in the franchise. And it's a villain car. And it's called the Flip Car. Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you seen that car, Aaron? So essentially, it's a wedge. It looks like an F1 car. It's a wedge, and he can basically go underneath cars and flip them. That's why it's called the Flip Car. And it does a lot of damage. So as Owen Shaw in the Flip Car chases around the team, one of the cars is flipped. Obviously, no one will be in it. They'll have to use the tow cable. And sends it upside down into a channel of water that's downstage, where it explodes and then sends water splashing in the front row. So I've always loved the soak zone thing. We've talked about Waterworld before, and
we talked about Waterworld in our Universal episode, our Universal Over Under.
That's right, and it's one of my favorite things, and I love that there's like a soak zone, especially in the heat when you're sitting outside. So I love the idea of an explosion causing a splash to splash the whole audience. And then Toretto says to Hobbs on the radio, "I guess I owe you a 10-second car." So we laugh about that. And then one of the coolest things that I don't even know how you practice something like this, but in Lights, Motors, Actions, there's a scene where 3 cars go up on 2 wheels. And they balance the car up on 2 wheels. And so I like the idea of having the flip car trying to flip Toretto, but then he's able to maintain it and drive the car on 2 wheels, just to prove that he's like an amazing driver, right? Like that's the whole point of this, is he's a fantastic driver. Doesn't matter what car he's in, right? And so eventually, they realize that Shaw can't defeat Toretto even with the flip car. So they get out of the cars and they do a stage combat scene between Toretto and Owen Shaw, which, of course, Shaw eventually gets defeated and arrested by Hobbs and Toretto. That's kind of my show. At the end, I would like more recognition for the stunt drivers. So at the end of Waterworld, kind of the same thing. What they do is everyone breaks character and they give full kind of like IMDb credits to all of the stunt performers and other things that they've been in. I think these drivers have probably been in pretty insane movies that we have. Maybe some of them have even been in Fast and the Furious movies, and we just don't know. True. So
most likely,
yeah.
For how big it is, it's
right.
Like, why wouldn't you have the best drivers?
I would imagine the community's pretty tight when it comes to stunt drivers and performers. So I like the idea of them getting applaud as they rev their engines, and then a host introduces them to the crowd with their credits. That's my stunt show. I cut it down a lot because obviously I could talk about this for like 3 hours, but that's kind of the basic gist. Is you're there just visiting, and then things go wrong, which is kind of every Fast and the Furious movie.
I love it. I think that's probably more relevant than a Bourne stunt show. Even though the Bourne stunt show is amazing, I don't think they're going to be making a lot more of those movies, and they certainly haven't done as well as the Fast franchise has.
Right. And I think I would imagine the Bourne Stuntacular costs a lot less than having,
definitely
15 stunt performers doing 4 shows a day. But I think if you're going to do a Fast and the Furious, attraction, you got to have real cars. You have to have real cars. People want to see smoking rubber, and that the sound of an engine.
It really captures the missing elements from just having a virtual attraction, which is you get the sense of speed and danger and thrill. You get to go fast. You get to see people who are furious. You don't really get that in a tram tour attraction.
You don't. And a lot of these screen attractions that you get a car that flips and explodes, but you don't really get to feel, that percussion in your chest from that explosion. So I like that idea of actually flipping a car by using these Hollywood techniques that they use in a movie. And obviously it'd be built like crazy to be able to do this, every show. But I mean, that would just be so cool to see that in real life, and it would be totally unexpected.
Yes. I mean, they did Lights, Motors, Action 3-4 times a day.
Yeah. I think their tires only lasted 2 shows. That's how much rubber they burned.
That would make sense, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think all of their cars, even in Florida, were French cars. Do you remember?
Yeah, they were Opals, but they were
All
shells. They
Opals.
were not
Hmm.
even car engines. They were Suzuki
They were like,
Hayabusa motors.
yeah, they were like motorcycle engines, weren't they?
That's right. Yeah, so they revved
Yeah.
really, really high, and they had 4 gears in forward and 4 gears in reverse. Totally
Yeah,
crazy.
they did go fast in reverse. And then they also had a reverse car
Hmm.
where there was like
The body was flipped.
well, yeah, the body was flipped, but the driver was exterior to the car in
That's
a
right.
little cage,
Yeah.
like hanging off the door, basically. And
Yeah.
it was like a really fun reveal to see like how great he was at driving in reverse.
Hmm.
Then it was just facing forward. The car was facing in reverse.
That's right. Definitely. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think it's a huge opportunity for Universal. I don't know what kind of contracts those stunt performers are under, or what type of, I don't know if there's a thing as like show patents or anything, experience patents that Disney might have on something like that. But man, people would flock to a show like that.
People would flip out. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I feel very fortunate that I got to see that show both in English in Florida and in French.
Yeah.
Wow, Drew. Wow. I had a feeling that you were going to do a stunt show, which is why I tried to stay away from it. And I'm so glad that I did because you smashed that out of the park. That's awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, I really want it to
Yeah.
happen.
I hope it does. I hope that does, even without all the other Fast and Furious park elements. I just hope that does. So we're now to the e-ticket ride. How did you approach the idea of doing a Fast and Furious ride?
It was something that I was really excited to do, and then I did not realize how difficult it would be. I don't know if you had that same problem, but like I said, Fast and the Furious, it's really hard to come up with something original that hasn't already been done. First of all, and then you also have to kind of, there's a fine line between representation with car companies, especially because they name drop a lot. And so
Yeah.
I don't know if you'd be able to do a lot of the, Motec exhaust, branding stuff that they do in the movies. So that was also kind of an obstacle. But I did come up with an attraction. Why don't I go first? Because I feel like you gave me some hints as to what yours is, and I'm really excited to hear about it. So I'm going to let you do yours after mine. My main attraction is going to be kind of, I want you to think of a mix between Test Track and Radiator Springs Racers. Once again, I think it's really important that you get guests into an actual car, because maybe that's just the car guy in me. But I think, if people are having that much fun in a ride in Florida that's based around Chevy, man,
Very true.
they're gonna have a great
Very
time
true.
when it's themed around Fast and the Furious. Now, the only difference between my version and theirs is I want the rear wheels to be on a separate track, and of course, the reason is because I want that baby to drift.
Yes.
Now, my
I
attraction
love it.
is actually not on the Tokyo side, so it has nothing to do with Tokyo Drift. It actually has something to do with the LA side. And specifically, it's focused around one iconic scene that's at the beginning of the first movie. So, your ride vehicle is going to resemble a black Honda Civic with green underglow, and it's going to glow like crazy.
Yes.
And a little backstory on me, by the way. This is it has to do with underglow. Oh boy. In high school, I actually drove my family's Honda Civic that I inherited from my sister. Like, she gave it to me because she got a new car. So one day I was working on my Honda Civic, and my neighbor came over and said, "Hey man, nice Honda Civic." And I said, "Thanks." And he said, "What are you doing to it?" I said, "Well, I'm a musician, so I want to put a subwoofer in it and some speakers." And he goes, "Oh, well, you should take it to my shop. I do all the car audio there. You should come over and check it out, and we'll install some stuff in your car." Okay, cool. So I did. I show up at this shop, and what do I see? I see a bunch of Fast and the Furious cars in that shop. He did not mention that he actually worked on most of the iconic cars that are in the first and second Fast and the Furious movies. So for me,
Fantastic.
that was my introduction into the tuner world. And I mean, like, what the heck? What an amazing
Yeah.
introduction. I drove a minivan before, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't really care much about cars unless it could fit a surfboard and a bike in the back, you know? So for
Right.
me, this was like, holy smokes, this is really cool. I got to be around all of these actual iconic movie cars, some of which were in the next movie. So it was really amazing for me to get this introduction. Anyway, so my car in high school, I mean, it was fully done up. It had underglow inside, outside, in the grill, underneath, banging stereo system. It was like the epitome of like the early 2000s Fast and the Furious kid. So
Excellent.
got in a ton of trouble. It set off car alarms because it was so loud. It was obnoxious. But I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I did it because it introduced me to this amazing world that you and I have been a part of with this car culture. So anyway, back to the attraction. So you're going to be in a black Honda Civic or something that looks like a Honda Civic. I don't know if Honda would be a proud sponsor of this attraction, but it has green lights underneath. And you go on a challenge to prove to Toretto and his gang that you have what it takes to be a part of their team. So you're hopping in one of their Honda Civics, and he actually puts a GPS system in your car that would be on like the main dash that would take you to a container ship docking area. So kind of like a port, like a container port probably in like Long Beach, where he was planning on putting you through some obstacles, right? So you pull in, there's containers to your left, to your right. It's this big, wide open area. And then all of a sudden, things go wrong the second you get there. And you're ambushed by federal officers who have no choice, who surround you. And Toretto, of course, tells you, you got to get out of there, like instantly. So they block the exit and you have no choice but to escape somehow. So what do? You create a smoke screen. So at that point, I want the car to actually go onto a turntable, and those rear wheels are going to put you in a circle, and then we're going to have a fog machine that fogs up the whole area, so it looks like you're doing a donut, which I think would be really cool. And then, of course, you barely escape, and the way you escape is by going under a semi-truck. Just like in the first movie, because I love that scene. And I know every car guy that's in a low car, when they drive by a semi-truck, they're like, wonder if I can fit under there. I know I do. So anyway, so you go under a semi-truck. It feels like a really close call. And then, of course, a chase ensues, and you're forced to prove yourself not in this safe space anymore, but out on public roads, weaving in and out of oncoming traffic. So obviously, like Aaron and I said, like these guys have kind of like this reckless car mentality where they just kind of like do whatever they need to do in their movies. So there will be multiple maneuvers that this ride vehicle is going to have to do. So like I said, it's going to need to drift. Those rear wheels are going to need to be on a separate track so that you really get that feeling like you're peeling around corners and barely hanging on the ragged edge, which I don't think Test Track and Radiator Springs Racers really gives you. Like, you never feel like the car's out of control at any point in time. So I really want that to be conveyed in my ride vehicle. And then, of course, you got to bail somehow. So what are you going to do? You need more power? You're going to hit that big NOS button right in the middle of the dash.
Absolutely.
You're going to feel the car take off a little bit. Everybody wants to know what NOS feels like. Obviously, this is going to be a totally exaggerated version of it, but what the heck? Why not? So big NOS button. And then one of the features that I want on the vehicles that I think, I'm surprised it's not on any vehicles yet, is to get that feeling of being chased by police. I actually want to put digital screens in the rear view mirrors so that you see blues and twos in the mirrors behind you, and then when you hit that NOS button, they just fade away. And I think that's a great way to like convey that like you are being chased. Like, I can only imagine being on Radiator Springs Racers. If you looked in the rearview mirror and you saw Frank behind you, it would feel a lot closer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's true.
So I want those screens there with blues and twos going, and then for them to fade away. And then, of course, when you evade the feds, you park in the alleyway of Toretto's garage. You and I. And at the end, you see that Hobbs has actually been with Toretto the whole time. and the ambush was just to see what you were capable of. So he actually sent them just to see how you'd be able to scramble out your way out of that situation. And then Hobbs says to Dom, I think you just found yourself a new wheelman. And then Dom says, I think I did too. Welcome to the team, or as we like to call, the family.
I love it. I love it.
That's my ride. I just think it's cool to put people in real cars.
Yeah.
You know? I don't know if it needs a windshield. I'm not planning on going nearly as fast as Test Track or Radiator Springs Racers. And I think the windshield kind of, you get less air blowing in your face. That's what you like about roller coasters, right? It feels more kind of hectic because the wind's in your face. So,
and the tighter the turns, the more G's you pull, you have that sense of force,
right,
that people mistake for speed. You know,
yeah,
people mistake Space Mountain for a fast ride. They mistake Thunder Mountain for a fast ride. They are not.
Exactly. And then what's really funny is you go on Radiator Springs Racers and it doesn't really feel that fast.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think the ability to have the rear wheels take a different track would be a challenge. I don't think it's impossible, but I just think you need that car to feel like it's slipping and sliding out of control, like it's a really hectic situation.
Well, we have one thing in common for sure, Drew. In my ride, it is all about being in the car and being the driver. So I think just even before I get into the details, that is something that we're right on the same page with.
Okay.
The ability to give the guest the experience of being behind the wheel instead of being, in the case of Fast and Furious Supercharged, dragged.
Yes.
Like, you want the sense that you are behind the wheel. You want the ability to have that thrill yourself. You want to be the main character in this Fast and Furious story. So that leads me into my ride, which I named Fast and Furious Redline. I thought that the idea of giving, like, pushing Redline is like that whole sensation of kind of a battle of risk versus reward. Will you make it? Will you not make it? Are you going to blow your engine? What's going to happen?
Can I say one thing before you get into your pre-show?
Yeah.
I would like to acknowledge the fact that you have called your attraction Fast and the Furious Redline, because if you're a big Fast and the Furious fan like I am, you'll know that the movie was actually named Redline before they changed it to Fast and the Furious. So that's perfect.
It's kind of like the old, there was a fake title for Star Wars called Blue Harvest. When Star Wars was like such a cultural event and they were out shooting Return of the Jedi, George Lucas said, we're calling this movie Blue Harvest. Don't worry about it. It's a horror movie. We're out in the desert. Don't come and look at what we're shooting because you're going to disrupt. So then when Seth MacFarlane goes and makes a Family Guy version, he calls it Blue Harvest.
Yeah, I love that.
Same reference.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up. So my queue building starts actually fairly similar to the entry in Orlando, but I want the garage that you enter actually to be much smaller in stature. And I want all the cars to look like crap. I don't want them to be race cars. I want them to be average, everyday Joe cars.
Okay.
On lifts, this is a regular service bay. You're not seeing something elegant, not something extravagant. This is a very average garage. Like, mechanics just went on lunch break. You're in this garage.
Yeah.
And so you're weaving around, and at the very end, you see an extremely clean car. It's like the one sports car in this entire garage. And so you get brought over to this just by nature of the line. And there's this little tiny CRT TV that's like sitting sort of on a toolbox, and it zaps to life and you see The Rock's face on it. And there's Agent Hobbs, and he says, "Hey, welcome to DSS." That's basically like the shield of Fast and Furious. It stands for Diplomatic Security Service. It's kind of like the sort of government entity, sort of like military, but nondescript, badass ops team.
Yeah.
So he says, you've been summoned into the DSS headquarters, in my case in Miami, but in fill in the blank, wherever this place is.
Yep.
And so we're going to bring you in. We're going to start the briefing process. And you see this sports car on a lift, and the sports car on a lift will be lifted off the ground, and that'll be your entry into what basically amounts to this enormous laboratory.
Ooh.
And you'll have this reveal that in my mind, I think I brought this up earlier, in my mind it's more like a James Bond moment, right, of like seeing cars being worked on, but you see like one is in a chamber being tested for like flame resistance. So there's like a guy in a lab coat just hitting it with a giant flamethrower.
Okay.
You see another one where like missiles are popping out, like missile launchers are popping out of the hood and out of like the side panels, and you see like the old license plate flipping through like multiple countries' licenses and like different numbers to like, you know, keep a low profile. Awesome. So this is now how you're being brought into this story. And so that was kind of more of the line that I took, was more of the like spy action movie thriller side of things.
Yeah, like the espionage.
It definitely diverts from the car culture-ness, and I guess that's really physically represented by going from the greasy garage into the immaculate laboratory. The movies are literally doing this, and so I thought, let's physically do this in the ride. And so we're in the laboratory, and we get briefed by Hobbs to say, look, we have intel. There is a car that is carrying schematics for just name anything, chemical weapon of mass destruction, doomsday device, or your grandma's recipe for cookies. It doesn't really matter. This is just the point to get onto the ride. Yes. So you are being briefed on your mission. Your mission is to intercept a car. And so you board your ride vehicle and you take off, and then you jump into the story. Now, before I get into the story, I want to talk about the actual layout of this track. If you know, one of the new, very new, I think, rides in Six Flags Magic Mountain in Valencia, in your neck of the woods, Drew, is West Coast Racers.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So I'm pulling a little bit of a page out of their book here, because what I want to do is at the halfway point of this track loop have a big break zone with a show building, and I want it right next to the loading area so that both cars can launch simultaneously.
Yeah, that's cool.
When you're at a different part in the story, that launch car that you initially boarded plays a new character. And so I'll explain what I mean by that.
Okay.
So you get in the car and you roll out towards the acceleration platform, still very slowly. You're just kind of like getting a lay of the land. And you see another car kind of like just take a corner and disappear from view. It gets brought up on a radio. Hey, that's our man. We need to track that guy down. Let me know if you hear anything out of the ordinary. Hobbs disconnects. Suddenly you hear an engine rev, and you see this car fly like a bat out of hell, and you immediately hit the accelerator, and you are going in tandem with this other car who is able to make a helix flip over you and continue driving away, out of shot, out of view, gone. Mm-hmm. You messed up. Immediately, you blew it. So then you continue along the ride, and you're brought into this show building. This show building would say, okay, so we lost track of them, but we have some new intel. We think we know what's going on. What we're going to do is we're going to equip your car with, or we're going to enable your car with a set of technology that we haven't quite fully tested here, but it's jump jacks. And so what you're going to be able to do is jump over the car that you need to intercept. Hobbs is going to get into the car with you, and when you jump over top, he's going to jump into the enemy's car and take care of business.
Okay.
This is now where you're set up at the midpoint of the ride. And so now you say, okay, we have the intel. We know where the car is coming from. You hear the same engine rev again, and you hit the gas again. And now you are hitting in that same line, but now the car's to your opposite side. You do the helix flip over top. You hear the rock say, I'm in the other car. I've got the intel. Get out of here. And guess what you do, Drew? You hit the NOS button.
Yes.
Of course, you have to. You have to. Now, one thing that I really wanted to implement, and this was like my big head scratcher moment of like, how do I implement this? One thing that I think would take this ride to the next level, besides the storytelling, besides it being a fun ride, and I mean, this roller coaster could be like on the level of a Velocicoaster of the Hulk, like a super fast, fun ride. But I think what would take it to the next level, besides just speed, is the ability to have the guests actually interact with the speed. I don't know how this would work on a technical scale, but what I imagined happening on a experience level is that you'd actually have a shift up and shift down button or a paddle in your car. I'm imagining like if the actual like handles are like a steering wheel, and you'd have like an up and down like thumb button, so you can hold on without being, you know, resisting the ride. And that the car would actually tabulate your reaction time to when you should shift. And it will give you like a visual indication of when you should shift, and actually score and rank you according to sort of like a collective, maybe a team of 4, your reaction time, but to also increase or decrease the speed according to your performance. I mean, we've been in some fast cars, and a 3-second 0 to 60 is quite fast, but a 2.5-second 0 to 60 feels different. I mean, on paper, a half a second, big whoop. You wouldn't be able to tell it differently if it's just breezing by you, but it feels different. Every 1/10 of a second increment that you improve does have that much more of a force against you. It
really does.
Exponential.
Yeah.
So to figure out a way in which you could actually tabulate sort of a collection, a team of 4 in a ride vehicle, or maybe a team of 8, whatever the case may be, and that their reaction time would have an effect on the acceleration. I have no idea if that would ever be safe enough to execute. There would have to be a minimum, of course. Like if everyone blew it and no one hit their buttons, that it would still proceed. I just think that the moment that I thought of as far as like hitting the NOS button, it's why I implemented it, maybe why you implemented it as well. There's actually that moment in Hagrid's Magical Creatures where you hit the Dragonfire button on the motorcycle, and that sends you flying. That sends you into an acceleration zone.
Yeah, I think it's totally possible. I think that they build rides nowadays, like rides that incorporate linear induction. Like linear induction isn't just used for takeoff anymore. It's also used to trim speed. So you could easily have a roller coaster vehicle that takes off faster, and then later towards the end of the line can be trimmed back down so that it safely makes the next maneuver. So I think that's totally possible. I absolutely think that's a cool idea. And a great way, like you've never been able to interact with the actual mechanics of you can do it with screens. Like you can do it with Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run. But like that would be you're talking like the equivalent of like if Mission Space gave you more G's because of your reaction time. That is really cool. Super cool.
Yes. And on a computational level, not very complicated.
No.
The more I thought about it, the more I thought, oh, this is just Guitar Hero.
Yeah.
Because it just really has to zero in on a target.
Yeah.
And then when you hit it as close to the target as you can, you have like a success failure rate. Right. And then that's just averaged in your group of 4 or 8. It's not hard on like a tabulation level.
Yeah.
But to be able to then supply that to the linear induction system and have that effect happen like in as close to real time as physically possible. Mind blow.
Yeah, I can totally see that being plausible.
Another element that I thought of that I don't think I've ever seen in a roller coaster setting. It actually is seen in Radiator Springs more or less, but is to have ride vehicles on separate track. So to have literally another ride vehicle, a dummy ride vehicle basically on like a tiny circle that could act as your enemy vehicle at the start of the ride, or to kind of like come out of corners and duck in and around.
Yeah.
Because the whole idea is to pull the trick on the guests that at the midpoint, the other people in the car are the enemy, and that when you took off, the other people at their midpoint are the enemy, and to kind of give you that sensation, that trick to pull on them, to say, hey, this is the thing that's happening. I even went as far as to like try and figure out if you were on always the proper side of the car, you could paint the ride vehicle in a gradient and have a voiceover saying, "All right, you're in the white car. Look out for the black car."
Yeah.
Where in fact, one side of the car is white, one side of the car is black, and I thought that would be a really neat effect. And you could sell it further by putting these little maybe 150-foot track elements that are just like flywheel activated. They don't have to actually be linear induction, and they don't really have to do anything but go in a small circle and then go into a maintenance bay. Like, that's it.
You can also achieve that with lighting, and I think a really good example of that is the Tron Light Cycle roller coaster. There's a scene where your vehicle, the wheels on the left side turn orange instead of white, and you go by a mirror, and it actually looks like there's an opposing vehicle running right next to you, when in reality it's your vehicle just reflecting off a mirror with a different light. So you could totally do
smart.
something like that. I think that's really cool, and I do like the idea of you not realizing that you're the bad car for the next people. I think that's totally like plausible with the use of today's technology.
It's doable.
And like, yeah, the reaction time could definitely be calculated into it. I don't think it would be that difficult, but that's super cool.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that mine is missing that maybe we could add, but it feels like it's already pre-packed, is your brilliant idea of drifting. I think drifting is the only thing that this thing is missing. It is very much like the straight line fast car. I mean, mine is really the Challenger and yours is the Supra ride.
I was going to say, yeah.
There we go.
If anything, the wide rear tires on the Challenger would be very difficult to drift. So
yes, indeed.
You can change it based on what ride vehicle you're on, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of cool. But
it would be sweet. The only thing, if it were a Challenger, that I would want to add is you got to do a wheelie. You got to pull a wheelie somehow. Has there been a roller coaster that does a wheelie? Wow.
Yeah, there has been, actually, and it's one that everyone talks trash on that I love, and it's called Rocket Rods.
Oh, of course. We keep bringing it back to... It always comes back to Rocket Rods, doesn't it?
Rocket Rods.
Well, Drew, this was a unique challenge of a topic for us, because the storytelling in the Fast and Furious franchise is so widely varying. I think what we came down to that both of us really worked well from is establishing like sort of a rule set or like a language by which we were going to work from to build our respective lands.
It was something that I was really excited to start. Like the idea of like, oh, let's build a Fast and the Furious land is like such an amazing idea. But then once you get like thinking about it, you're like, oh man, what part? Because you're right. It's such a wide variety of different scenes and iconic scenes. And it's like, they all kind of like weirdly like mix into one. You're like, is that from Fast 5 or is that 7 or 4 or... You know, so it's hard to follow. So I think what we did with like honing in on like using the specific cars to tell the story and the timeline works a lot better. I hope that Universal Studios sees the value that they have in Fast and the Furious besides ticket sales, like in creating these experiences maybe off of the cars and not so much the characters, you know what I mean? I think people resonate with the iconic vehicles, and like I said, I'm really hoping that we will eventually get some sort of experience that has to do with the magic of movie cars, and those are the real heroes of these movies. The amount of cars that they've destroyed, and movie cars are great, and I'm sure we'll have another episode about movie cars eventually because I want to. But yeah, super fun. Had a great time. I think that's the end of this episode. We hope that you guys had a really, really great time listening to our ideas, and I want to hear your ideas too. So make sure you leave a comment down below. We're going to be doing a lot more cool ideas like this where we imagine different attractions for movies that are maybe a little bit underrepresented. So Let us know what you would do for Fast and the Furious. Did you agree with some of the things that we did? Did you disagree?
I'm particularly curious because there's been a lot of rumors around the third gate of Universal in Orlando, Epic Universe, and I think
Yeah.
that has a lot of territory that's yet to be firmly established. And I could definitely see some car based or even Fast and Furious based attractions coming in that area, especially if in the next few years the Fast and Furious movies continue to dominate as they have. They are an undeniable juggernaut at the box office, and I think that they're going to be a main staple of Universal for a long time to come.
Yeah, and whether you're a fan of the franchise or not, we can all agree that the current representation that Fast and Furious has in the Universal parks is, yeah, Aaron said it. It's terrible.
It's not good.
It's two thumbs down. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. We had a great time pitching these ideas.
See you in the next one.
Bye.